The crash had been violent. Zara pressed herself against the twisted metal wall of what remained of her escape pod, her large violet eyes scanning the alien forest around her. Everything here was wrong. The trees grew too tall. The gravity felt heavy against her small frame, and the air smelled of unfamiliar chemicals that made her sensitive nose twitch with each breath. She was barely 3 feet tall, even for her species, the Cathara, and her silvery skin now bore several cuts from the crash. Her pointed ears drooped with exhaustion and fear. The emergency beacon in her pod had been damaged beyond repair. No one knew where she was. No one was coming to help. The planet's star was setting, casting strange orange and red shadows through the canopy above. Soon it would be dark, and she had no idea what creatures might emerge to hunt in these alien woods. Her people were peaceful explorers, scientists and artists who had never known violence until the Drakari Empire attacked their homeworld 3 cycles ago. Zara touched the small pendant around her neck, the last gift from her mother before the evacuation ships fled their burning cities. Most of her people had escaped, but many ships like hers had been forced to scatter across the galaxy to avoid capture. The Drakari collected other species as slaves, and the Cathara's small size and intelligence made them valuable for working in tight spaces on starships and mining operations. A branch snapped somewhere in the darkness beyond her crashed pod. Zara froze, her heart racing so fast she could hear it pounding in her ears. Something large was moving through the forest, and it was coming closer. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows of her ruined ship, trying to make herself as small as possible. The footsteps grew louder, heavy, deliberate, unlike anything she had heard before. Through a gap in the pod's hull, she caught a glimpse of the creature approaching. It walked upright on 2 legs like her own people, but it was massive, easily twice the height of a full-grown Cathara male. Its skin appeared pale in the dim light, and it wore strange coverings over its body. As it drew nearer to her hiding spot, Zara could see more details that filled her with terror. This creature had forward-facing eyes like a predator, and its hands ended in what looked like thick, powerful fingers that could easily crush her small bones. When it spoke, calling out words in an alien language, its voice was deep and rumbling like distant thunder. She had heard stories from other refugees about the creatures called humans. They were said to be one of the younger species in the galaxy, but they had spread across many worlds with frightening speed. Some said they were violent by nature, descendants of pack hunters who had conquered their own world before reaching for the stars. Others whispered that they kept other species as pets or slaves, just like the Drakari. The human stopped directly outside her pod. It called out again in that strange, harsh language. When no response came, it began to circle her crash site, clearly investigating. Through another crack in the hull, Zara watched in horror as the creature examined the debris scattered around the impact crater. It picked up pieces of her ship with casual ease, turning them over in those massive hands. When it found a section with Cathara writing etched into the metal, it paused for a long moment. Then it spoke again, but this time its voice was softer, less threatening. It almost sounded like it was trying to be gentle. Zara didn't understand the words, but something in the creature's tone made her ears prick up slightly. It didn't sound like the roaring of a predator calling to its pack. It sounded more like concern, but that had to be her imagination. These humans were supposed to be dangerous. The creature set down the piece of debris carefully rather than throwing it aside. It took a few steps back from her pod and sat down heavily on a fallen log, making itself smaller and less intimidating. Then it began to speak again, using that same soft tone. The words meant nothing to Zara, but the rhythm and melody of them reminded her somehow of the lullabies her mother used to sing. Minutes passed. The human remained sitting quietly, occasionally speaking a few words but making no move to approach her hiding place. As the darkness deepened, it reached into one of its coverings and produced a small device that began to glow with warm, steady light. It placed this light source on the ground between them and then moved back again. Zara found herself confused by this behavior. If the human wanted to capture her, why was it sitting so far away? Why hadn't it already torn apart her flimsy shelter and dragged her out? The crashed pod wouldn't offer much protection against a creature of that size and apparent strength. Her stomach growled loudly in the silence. She hadn't eaten since before the crash, and her body's energy reserves were running dangerously low. The human seemed to hear the sound because it reached into its coverings again and brought out what appeared to be food. It unwrapped something and held it up so she could see it clearly in the light. The smell that reached her was amazing, Whatever the human was holding, it smelled better than anything she had eaten in weeks. Her mouth watered despite her fear. The human broke off a small piece and set it on the ground near the light, then moved back to its log. This was clearly some kind of trap. The creature was trying to lure her out with food so it could grab her. But the smell was so good, and she was so hungry, and the human had moved so far away. Maybe she could dart out quickly, grab the food, and retreat before it could react. Zara waited until the human appeared to be looking away, then crept as quietly as possible to the edge of her hiding spot. The food was only a few feet away, just at the edge of the light's reach. She tensed her muscles, ready to spring forward and back in one quick motion. But as she prepared to move, the human turned its massive head toward her. Their eyes met across the small clearing, and Zara felt her breath catch in her throat. She had expected to see hunger or cruelty in those alien features. Instead, she saw something that made no sense at all. The human's eyes were soft and kind, filled with what looked like genuine concern. When it saw her, it didn't lunge forward or shout in triumph. Instead, it slowly and deliberately moved even further away, giving her more space. It gestured gently toward the food and spoke a single word that needed no translation, the universal gesture of offering. Zara stared at this massive predator that was behaving like no predator she had ever imagined. Her hunger warred with her fear as she tried to understand what was happening. Everything she had been told about humans suggested they should be dangerous, violent, untrustworthy. But this one was offering her food and keeping its distance, almost as if it understood how frightened she was. The human reached into its coverings again and brought out another object, a small rectangular device that began to glow with moving images. It held the device so she could see the screen and touch something on its surface. Suddenly, Zara heard her own language coming from the machine. "Please do not be afraid," the device said in perfectly clear Cathara. "My name is Marcus. I want to help you." Zara's ears shot upright in shock. How did this human know her language? How did it know she needed help? She pressed herself back against the pod wall, but found herself listening intently as the device continued. "I know you are hurt and scared. I can see your ship crashed. I have food and medical supplies. I will not hurt you. I only want to help." The translation device went quiet. The human Marcus set it down near the food and moved back again. He spoke directly to her then, and the device translated his words a moment later. "I know you do not trust me. That is smart. You do not know me, but you need help, and I am the only one here. Please let me show you I mean no harm." Zara's mind raced. This changed everything. If the human could understand her, maybe she could understand it. Maybe this wasn't a trap after all. But her people's warnings echoed in her memory. Humans were dangerous. They couldn't be trusted. They were predators who would say anything to lower their prey's guard. But this Marcus had already had multiple chances to capture her. He was so much larger and stronger that her flimsy hiding place wouldn't have stopped him for even a moment. If he wanted to hurt her, why all this elaborate deception? Why the gentle voice and careful distance? Her stomach growled again, louder this time. The smell of the food was making it hard to think clearly. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and her small body needed constant nutrition to function properly. If she didn't eat soon, she would collapse from hunger whether the human captured her or not. Marcus seemed to understand her dilemma. He stood up slowly, making sure to move deliberately so as not to startle her. Then he walked even further away until he was barely visible at the edge of the light's reach. The translation device remained where he had left it, near the food. "I will go over here," his voice came through the translator. "You can take the food. I will not come closer unless you say it is okay." Zara watched him settle down against a distant tree, making himself as non-threatening as possible. She waited several minutes, but he made no move to approach. Finally, her hunger overcame her caution. She crept out of her hiding place, grabbed the piece of food, and darted back to safety. The food was incredible. It was some kind of protein bar, dense with nutrients and flavored with something sweet that reminded her of the fruit trees back home. As she ate, she found herself watching the human more carefully. He remained at his distant tree, occasionally speaking softly to his own translator device, but otherwise simply waiting. When she finished eating, Zara felt strength returning to her small body. The food had been enough to sustain her for several hours, which was generous by human standards, but exactly what her fast metabolism required. How had Marcus known to give her the right amount? How had he known her species' dietary needs? As if reading her thoughts, Marcus spoke again through the translator. I have studied many species. I know Cathara need frequent nutrition. I have more food when you are ready. Also water and medicine for your injuries. He gestured toward a large pack sitting beside his original position. Zara could see that it was filled with supplies, not just food, but what looked like medical equipment, water containers, and other items that would be useful to a stranded traveler. This wasn't the random encounter she had assumed. Marcus had come prepared to help someone. Are you a rescue worker? She asked, speaking aloud for the first time since the crash. Her voice was small and shaky, but the translator picked it up and conveyed her words to Marcus. His response surprised her. No, I am an explorer like you. I saw your ship fall from the sky. I came to help. Why, I am nothing to you. My people have nothing to offer yours. Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. Where I come from, we help those who need help. It does not matter what species they are. You are small and hurt and far from home. That is enough. Zara felt something strange happening in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the food she had eaten. This massive creature, who could have simply ignored her crashed ship or taken what he wanted from it, had instead spent time learning her language and gathering supplies to help her. The concept was so alien to everything she had experienced since the war began that she found herself struggling to accept it. My people say humans are dangerous, she said cautiously. Some humans are dangerous, Marcus replied honestly. Some Cathara are dangerous too, some of every species, but many are good. I try to be good. The simple honesty of this statement affected Zara more than any elaborate promise could have. Marcus didn't try to convince her that all humans were peaceful or that she had nothing to fear. He just stated the truth, that individuals could choose to be good or bad, regardless of their species. As the night deepened around them, Zara found herself gradually relaxing. Marcus remained at his respectful distance, occasionally offering food or water but never pushing her to accept. He answered her questions about the planet they were on. Apparently it was called Haven, and it was inhabited by several peaceful species who had formed a small alliance. He had been exploring the northern continent when he saw her ship's impact. Are there others like you here? She asked. Other humans? A few. We have a small research station about 50 kilometers south of here. My team is studying the local ecosystem. Will they come looking for you? Eventually, but I sent a message that I was investigating the crash site. They will give me time to help you first. Zara felt another surge of that strange warmth. Marcus had actively delayed his own rescue to focus on helping her. She began to understand that her assumptions about humans might be completely wrong. When exhaustion finally began to overtake her fear, Marcus offered to set up a shelter for the night. He worked quietly and efficiently, using materials from his pack to create a small but weatherproof linta near her crash site. He positioned it so that she could retreat to her original hiding place if she felt threatened, but also so that she would be protected from the elements. You sleep, he said through the translator. I will watch for dangerous animals. You are safe. Zara wanted to protest that she couldn't trust him that much, but her body was already betraying her. The warmth of the shelter and the presence of food in her stomach were making her drowsy. Before she could stop herself, she was curled up in the soft materials Marcus had provided, drifting toward sleep. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was Marcus's voice, speaking softly in his own language. She didn't need the translator to understand the tone. It was a lullaby, just like the ones her mother used to sing. This massive, terrifying predator was singing her to sleep like she was something precious that needed to be protected. For the first time since her ship had crashed, Zara felt truly safe. Zara woke to the smell of cooking food and the gentle warmth of sunlight on her face. For a moment, she forgot where she was and almost called out for her mother. Then memory rushed back, the crash, the fear, the impossible human who had sung her to sleep. She opened her eyes carefully and saw Marcus sitting by a small fire, preparing what looked like breakfast. He had moved his position during the night to give her even more space, but he was close enough that she could see the care with which he was handling the food. When he noticed she was awake, he smiled and spoke softly to his translator. Good morning, Zara. Did you sleep well? She realized she must have told him her name at some point during their conversation the night before, though she couldn't remember when. The fact that he had remembered it, that he used it naturally rather than calling her creature or alien, made something inside her chest flutter with an emotion she couldn't identify. Yes, she answered, surprised to find it was true. Despite everything, she had slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in weeks. Thank you for watching over me. Marcus shook his head and said something that the translator rendered as, "You do not need to thank me for doing what is right." He had prepared another nutrition bar for her, along with some kind of warm drink that smelled like the comfort teas her people made from mountain herbs. When she emerged from her shelter to accept the food, she noticed that Marcus had spent part of the night working on her escape pod. "I fixed your emergency beacon," he explained, seeing her looking at the ship. "It should reach any Cathara vessels that come looking for survivors. I also repaired the environmental controls, so you have clean air and water while we wait." Zara stared at him in amazement. While she slept, this human had spent hours repairing her ship, not to claim it for himself, but to make her more comfortable and increase her chances of rescue. The mechanical work looked complex and precise, requiring tools and knowledge she hadn't expected him to possess. "How do you know Cathara technology?" she asked. "I study many things," Marcus replied with what she was beginning to recognize as characteristic modesty. "My job is to understand how different species solve engineering problems. Your people make very elegant electronics, much better than human designs in some ways." This casual admission that her species was superior to his own in certain areas shocked Zara. Everything she had been told about humans suggested they were arrogant conquerors who believed themselves better than all other species. Yet Marcus spoke of Cathara engineering with genuine admiration and respect. As they ate breakfast together, with Marcus still maintaining his careful distance, Zara found herself asking questions about human society. What she learned continued to challenge everything she thought she knew. Humans, according to Marcus, were relatively new to interstellar travel. They had only been exploring the galaxy for about 200 of their years. During that time, they had encountered dozens of other species and had formed peaceful relationships with most of them. The research station where Marcus worked was actually a joint project between humans and 3 other species, all working together to study the unique ecosystem of Haven. "But I heard humans are warriors," Zara said, "that you conquered many worlds." Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Humans do have wars. We fight sometimes, yes. But mostly we fight other humans over resources or ideas. When we meet other species, we usually try to learn from them instead of fighting them." "What about the stories of human slave traders, or humans who capture other species?" The expression on Marcus's face darkened. "There are some humans who do bad things, pirates, criminals, people who ignore our laws, but they are few, and we hunt them when we find them. Most humans would be angry to learn someone was taking slaves." Zara studied his face as the translator conveyed his words. She had become good at reading expressions during her time as a refugee. Survival often depended on understanding whether someone was lying or telling the truth. Marcus showed no signs of deception. If anything, he seemed genuinely disturbed by the idea of humans engaging in slavery. "Why do you care what I think about humans?" she asked. "I am just one small Cathara. My opinion does not matter." "Every person's opinion matters," Marcus said immediately. "And you are not just anything. You are Zara. You matter because you exist." The simple sincerity of this statement hit Zara like a physical blow. For months, she had felt like nothing more than a refugee number, a burden on the ships that carried her people to safety. The idea that she had value simply because she existed was so foreign that she found herself blinking back tears. Marcus noticed her emotional response and leaned forward slightly, his face full of concern. "Did I say something wrong? I am sorry if I upset you." "No," Zara managed. "No, you said something very right. It is just, no one has told me I matter in a long time." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "You have been running from the Drakari Empire." It wasn't a question. Somehow, Marcus had already figured out what had happened to her people. Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I am sorry," Marcus said softly. "I heard about the attack on your homeworld. It should not have happened. No one should have to flee their home." "How do you know about that?" "The news reached us about 3 months ago. Several human fleets went to help with the evacuation. We saved who we could, but—" He trailed off, clearly not wanting to remind her of those who hadn't escaped. Zara felt the world spinning around her. "Human fleets helped evacuate my people." "Of course. When we heard about the attack, every available ship volunteered to help. We managed to save about 60,000 Cathara before the Drakari blockade closed. This information was so contrary to everything Zara had been told that she found herself questioning her own memory. According to the refugees on her ship, humans had ignored the Cathara's plight, focusing on their own interests while her people suffered. Yet Marcus spoke matter-of-factly about a massive human rescue operation. Why wasn't this known? The refugees I traveled with said humans refused to help. Marcus looked troubled. There may have been misinformation. The Drakari are good at spreading lies to turn species against each other, or maybe the refugees you met were from ships that escaped before the human fleets arrived. The evacuation was chaotic. Not everyone would have seen what happened. Zara felt a cold realization creeping over her. What if everything she had been told about humans was Drakari propaganda? What if the fear and hatred her fellow refugees felt was based on lies designed to keep them isolated and weak? "How many of my people did you save?" she asked quietly. "As many as we could. The human ships took about 40,000 to safe colonies. Other species saved the rest. Your people are scattered now, but they are alive. Many are working with us to find other survivors." "Working with you?" "Yes, the Cathara who joined human colonies have been helping us locate other refugee ships. They know your technology better than we do, so they can detect your ship's signatures from much greater distances. Without their help, we would never have found many of the survivors." Zara's mind reeled with this information. Not only had humans saved her people, but those same people were now working together to rescue others. The cooperation Marcus described was the opposite of everything she had been taught to expect. "Is that why you were so prepared to help me? Because you have experience with Cathara refugees?" Marcus smiled. "Partly, but also because it is the right thing to do. You needed help, I was able to give it. It does not need to be more complicated than that." As the morning progressed, Marcus began preparations for their journey to his research station. He explained that while her beacon was working, it might take days or weeks for a Cathara ship to detect it. In the meantime, she would be safer and more comfortable at the station, where there were proper medical facilities and other people who could help her. "Will the others accept me?" Zara asked nervously. "The other humans at your station?" "Of course, we have hosted refugees before. Dr. Chen, our lead scientist, specifically requested to be assigned to Haven because she wanted to help people in your situation. A human doctor wants to help refugees. Dr. Chen lost her own home when she was young. Her planet was attacked by raiders when she was about your age. She knows what it feels like to be afraid and alone in strange places. She has spent her whole career helping people who have been displaced by war." This revelation added another layer to Zara's growing understanding of human complexity. Not only did they help other species, but they were motivated by personal experience with suffering. Dr. Chen wasn't helping refugees out of abstract charity, but because she remembered being in their situation herself. As Marcus packed his equipment and prepared her pod for the journey, Zara found herself studying him with new eyes. His movements were careful and efficient, but she noticed how he handled her belongings with particular gentleness. When he found a small data crystal containing pictures of her family, he held it as carefully as if it were made of spun glass. "These are your family?" he asked, showing her the crystal. "Yes, my parents and younger brother. I do not know where they are now." Marcus carefully sealed the crystal in a protective case before placing it in his pack. "We will help you find them. The human colonies maintain databases of all refugees. If your family made it to safety, we can locate them." The casual way he included himself in her future plans startled Zara. She had expected him to help her reach safety and then return to his own life. The idea that he might continue helping her beyond this immediate crisis hadn't occurred to her. "Why would you do that? Once I reach your station, I will be someone else's responsibility." Marcus stopped packing and looked at her directly. "Zara, you will never be just someone's responsibility to me. You are my friend now. Friends help each other." Friend, the word hit Zara with unexpected force. She had made so few connections during her time as a refugee that she had almost forgotten what friendship felt like. The other survivors had been kind enough, but everyone was too wrapped up in their own trauma and lost to form real bonds. Marcus was offering something she hadn't dared hope for. "I would like to be your friend too," she said quietly. Marcus's smile lit up his entire face. Good, then it is settled. We will find your family together. The journey to the research station took most of the day. Marcus set an easy pace, making frequent stops so Zara could rest and eat. He carried most of their supplies without complaint, despite the fact that his own pack was already quite heavy. When the terrain became difficult, he offered to carry her as well, though he was careful to ask permission first and respect her choice when she preferred to walk. During their breaks, they talked about many things. Marcus told her about Earth, his home planet, describing cities that floated on water and mountains that reached above the clouds. Zara shared stories of her own homeworld, the crystal cities that had gleamed in triple sunlight and the vast libraries where her people had stored the knowledge of centuries. "Do you think we will ever be able to rebuild?" she asked during one of their stops. "I know you will," Marcus replied with conviction. "The Cathara are strong and intelligent. You survived the Drakari attack, you escaped across the galaxy, you crashed on an unknown planet and lived through the night. If you can do all that, you can rebuild anything." His faith in her people was absolute and unquestioning. Zara realized that Marcus didn't see the Cathara as weak refugees who needed permanent protection. He saw them as temporarily displaced people who would eventually reclaim their strength and independence. This respect for her people's capability meant more to her than all his offers of help combined. As the sun began to set, they finally crested a hill and saw the research station below. It was larger than Zara had expected, a collection of buildings surrounded by gardens and experimental plots where various species were studying local plant life. She could see several different types of beings moving between the buildings, and the sight of such casual cooperation between species filled her with wonder. "Welcome to Haven Station," Marcus said with obvious pride. "Your new home for as long as you need it." Zara looked up at her human friend, and she realized that's exactly what he had become, and felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." "Thank you for trusting me," he replied. "Now come, let's introduce you to the rest of the family." As they walked down the hill toward the lights and warmth of the station, Zara reflected on how completely her understanding of humans had changed in less than 24 hours. She had crashed on this planet expecting the worst from any alien species she might encounter. Instead, she had found kindness, respect, and friendship in the most unlikely place. Perhaps, she thought, the galaxy was full of people like Marcus, beings who chose to help rather than harm, to build bridges rather than walls. Perhaps there was hope for more than just survival. Perhaps there was hope for a better future than anyone had dared imagine. The first person to greet them at Haven Station was Dr. Alina Chen, exactly as Marcus had described her. She was smaller than Marcus, with graying hair and kind eyes behind thin glasses, but Zara could sense the same gentle strength that had drawn her to trust her human friend. Dr. Chen knelt down to Zara's eye level when they met, a gesture of respect that immediately put the young Cathara at ease. "Welcome, Zara," Dr. Chen said through her own translation device. "Marcus told us about your situation. We're honored to help you." Honored to help, not obligated, not burdened with the duty. Honored. Zara felt that same strange warmth she had experienced with Marcus, the sensation of being valued rather than merely tolerated. The tour of the station that followed exceeded all of Zara's expectations. The facility housed not just humans, but representatives of 6 different species working together on various research projects. There was Kef, a tall reptilian being from the Saurian collective, who was studying geological formations. 2 fuzzy creatures called Nolly were analyzing atmospheric conditions. A graceful aquatic species known as the Ceruleans maintained the station's water purification systems. What struck Zara most forcefully was how naturally everyone interacted. There was no sense of hierarchy based on species, no indication that humans considered themselves superior to their alien colleagues. When disagreements arose during their project discussions, they were settled through debate and compromise rather than dominance displays. "How long has this station existed?" Zara asked Dr. Chen as they walked through the botanical laboratory. "About 5 years. It started as a human research outpost, but we quickly realized we needed expertise from other species to properly understand Haven's ecosystem. Each species sees different aspects of the environment. Working together, we learned far more than any of us could discover alone. And everyone volunteered to work with humans." Dr. Chen smiled. "Actually, the humans volunteered to work with everyone else. We approached the other species and asked if they would be willing to collaborate. Most were curious enough about human methods to give it a try. This reversed perspective humans as the ones asking to join existing scientific communities rather than demanding leadership was another piece of evidence that Zara's preconceptions about the species had been completely wrong. That evening, the station held what Dr. Chen called an integration dinner, apparently a tradition whenever someone new joined their community. The meal featured foods from all the represented species, prepared in ways that everyone could safely consume. Zara found herself seated between Marcus and Kef, who turned out to be a philosopher as well as a geologist. "I have heard of your people," Kef told her in his deep, rumbling voice. "The Cathara are renowned for their mathematical insights. Your species developed the theoretical framework that most galactic navigation systems still use." "You know our history?" Zara asked, surprised. Of course, any serious scientist knows the contributions of major species. Human computational systems are based partly on Cathara algorithms. Saurian engineering uses principles developed by your architects. The galaxy is richer because of what your people have shared. Around the table, others began sharing their own knowledge of Cathara achievements. Dr. Chen mentioned their medical techniques. The Nali praised their artistic traditions. Even the youngest researcher present, a human barely older than Zara herself, spoke knowledgeably about Cathara poetry. For the first time since fleeing her homeworld, Zara felt proud of her heritage rather than ashamed of her refugee status. These people didn't see her as a burden or a victim. They saw her as a representative of a species that had given valuable gifts to galactic civilization. "We were hoping," Dr. Chen said carefully, "that you might be willing to share some of your knowledge with us while you're here. Not as payment for our help," she added quickly, "but because we would genuinely like to learn. Our mathematical models of havens' weather patterns have some gaps that Cathara computational methods might help us fill." The request was made so diplomatically, with such obvious respect for Zara's right to refuse, that she found herself nodding before she fully considered the implications. "I would be happy to help," she said, "though I am not sure how much I know that would be useful." "You know more than you think," Marcus assured her. "All Cathara receive education in mathematical principles that most species consider advanced specialization." Over the following days, Zara settled into a routine at Haven Station that gradually began to feel like something approaching normal life. Her mornings were spent working with the research teams, applying Cathara mathematical techniques to various problems. Her afternoons were often free for rest and exploration of the station's facilities. Evenings were social time, when the various species gathered to share meals and stories. The work was genuinely engaging. Haven's ecosystem was more complex than Zara had initially realized, with multiple interconnected weather systems that created microclimates throughout the planet. The mathematical models needed to predict these patterns were exactly the type of multivariable calculus that Cathara children learned as easily as basic arithmetic. Within a week, Zara's contributions had helped the team solve 3 problems that had been puzzling them for months. The success was gratifying, but even more important was how her colleagues treated her achievements. There was no condescending surprise that someone so young could make meaningful contributions. They simply accepted her insights as valuable input and built upon them to advance their research. "You have a gift," Dr. Chen told her after Zara had developed a particularly elegant solution to an atmospheric modeling problem. "Have you considered studying advanced atmospheric science? Several universities in human space offer excellent programs, and I think you would excel in them." The suggestion was casually made, but it hit Zara like lightning. A future. Dr. Chen was talking about a real future, not just survival but education and career development. The possibility that she might one day have a normal life again, pursuing knowledge and making discoveries, seemed almost too wonderful to believe. "I would need to find my family first," Zara said carefully. "Of course, but the programs I'm thinking of are specifically designed to accommodate refugees. They help with family reunification as part of the admission process. If you're interested, I can put you in contact with the admissions coordinators." That night, Zara found herself unable to sleep as she considered the possibilities Dr. Chen had opened up. For months, her only goal had been to survive each day. Now suddenly, she was being offered the chance to plan for years ahead, to rebuild not just her life but her dreams. She was still awake when her door chimed softly with an incoming communication. Marcus's voice came through her room speaker, careful and gentle. "Zara, are you awake? There is news from the refugee database search." Zara's heart began racing. She had submitted her family's information to the human refugee tracking system 3 days ago, but she hadn't dared hope for quick results. She opened her door to find Marcus standing in the corridor, holding a data pad and wearing an expression she couldn't quite read. "Good news or bad news?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Good news, very good news." The data pad contained location information for her entire family. Her parents and brother had all survived the evacuation and were currently living in a refugee settlement on a planet called New Harmony, about 6 weeks' travel from Haven. The settlement was managed jointly by human and cerulean authorities, and according to the reports, conditions there were quite good. "They are alive," Zara whispered, staring at the pictures attached to the file. "They are all alive." "Yes, and more than that. Look at this." Marcus pointed to another section of the report. "Your brother has been accepted into an engineering program at New Harmony University. Your mother is working with the settlement's botanical team. Your father is helping design housing for new refugees. Not just alive, but thriving, building new lives instead of merely surviving." The relief was so overwhelming that Zara found herself crying for the first time since the crash. Marcus immediately knelt down and pulled her into a gentle hug, letting her sob against his shoulder until the emotion had run its course. "We can arrange transport whenever you want to go," he told her when she had calmed down. "There is a supply ship heading to that sector next month." Zara pulled back to look at him, suddenly realizing what this news meant. She would leave Haven Station. She would leave Marcus and Dr. Chen and all the friends she had made here. The prospect of reuniting with her family filled her with joy, but the thought of leaving this place that had become home filled her with unexpected sorrow. "Will you come with me?" she asked before she could stop herself. "To New Harmony." Marcus looked surprised by the question. "If you want me to, but why?" "Because you are my friend. Because I do not want to say goodbye to you. Because—" She struggled to find words for feelings she didn't fully understand herself. "Because you saved me, and I want my family to meet the human who showed me that the galaxy is not as dark as I thought." Marcus's expression grew soft and thoughtful. "I would be honored to meet your family, and I think Dr. Chen would be interested in the research opportunities at New Harmony. The refugee settlement there has some innovative agricultural projects that align with our work here." "You mean other people might come too?" "If you wanted them to. The great thing about being part of a research community is that we can collaborate across multiple locations. Some of our team could establish a satellite facility at New Harmony, maintaining connections with both places." The idea was almost too perfect to believe. Not only could she reunite with her family, but she could maintain the friendships and working relationships she had built at Haven Station. She could continue contributing to meaningful research while also reconnecting with her roots. Over the following weeks, as preparations were made for the journey to New Harmony, Zara reflected often on the remarkable chain of events that had brought her to this point. A terrifying crash had led to the most important friendship of her life. Fear and desperation had transformed into hope and purpose. What had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something far better than what she had lost. Dr. Chen did indeed decide to establish a research outpost at New Harmony, bringing with her 2 other team members and a wealth of equipment for studying refugee agricultural innovations. Marcus arranged for a permanent transfer, citing his interest in refugee integration programs. Kef announced that New Harmony's geological formations were worth investigating and requested assignment to the new facility. "Are you sure you are not just making excuses to continue helping me?" Zara asked Marcus as they prepared to board the transport ship. Marcus grinned. "Maybe partly, but mostly we are making excuses to continue working with you. You have become essential to our research, Zara. We are not ready to lose your contributions." As their ship lifted off from Haven and began its journey across the galaxy, Zara looked out at the stars and thought about how much her understanding of the universe had changed. The galaxy that had once seemed filled with dangers and enemies now appeared rich with possibilities for friendship and cooperation. She thought about the stories she would tell her family about humans, not the frightening tales of conquest and cruelty that had shaped her initial fears. but true stories of kindness and respect and genuine desire to help those in need. She thought about the work they would do together at New Harmony, humans and Cathara and other species building something better than any of them could create alone. Most of all, she thought about Marcus, who had found a tiny, terrified refugee in a crashed ship and had somehow seen potential for friendship and collaboration instead of burden and obligation. The human who had taught her that the most important truth about any species was not what they were capable of destroying, but what they chose to build. The journey to New Harmony would take several weeks, but for the first time since fleeing her homeworld, Zara wasn't focused on reaching the destination. She was content to simply enjoy the journey, surrounded by friends and filled with hope for whatever came next. The approach to New Harmony took Zara's breath away. The planet gleamed like a blue-green jewel against the darkness of space, with swirling white clouds that painted ever-changing patterns across its surface. But what amazed her most were the orbital installations surrounding the world, not military platforms or defensive stations, but agricultural laboratories and manufacturing facilities designed to support the refugee populations below. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Captain Torres, the human commander of their transport ship. "New Harmony has become one of the most successful refugee integration projects in this sector. What started as an emergency settlement has grown into a thriving colony." Through the observation deck windows, Zara could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going from the orbital stations. Some were bringing supplies and new refugees, others were carrying away the products of New Harmony's industries. The sight filled her with a pride she hadn't expected. Her fellow refugees hadn't just survived, they had built something remarkable. Marcus stood beside her at the windows, watching her reaction with obvious pleasure. "Your people have accomplished amazing things here, Zara. The refugee settlements aren't just surviving, they're contributing to the whole sector's economy. Cathara mathematical innovations have improved agricultural yields across 12 different worlds." Dr. Chen joined them at the observation deck, carrying a data pad filled with information about New Harmony's research facilities. "The integration has been remarkable. Refugee populations from 8 different species are working together on projects that none of them could have accomplished alone. The diversity of perspectives has led to breakthroughs in everything from medicine to engineering." As they descended toward the planet's surface, Zara could see the evidence of this collaboration everywhere. The cities below were a blend of architectural styles from multiple species, with Cathara crystal-growing techniques creating beautiful spires that housed facilities designed by Saurian engineers and powered by cerulean energy systems. Gardens and parks integrated plant species from dozens of different homeworlds, creating ecosystems that were entirely new but somehow harmonious. The spaceport where they landed was bustling with activity. Zara watched in wonder as beings of many species worked together to unload cargo, direct traffic, and assist passengers. There was an efficiency and cooperation here that spoke of years of practice, of people who had learned to work together because they had to, and had discovered they actually enjoyed it. But all of that faded into background noise when Zara saw 3 familiar figures pushing through the crowd toward her. Her mother's silver hair caught the light as she ran, her father's deep violet eyes were bright with tears, and her younger brother Kyan had grown so much that she almost didn't recognize him. Then they were all embracing her at once, a tangle of arms and voices and overwhelming joy. "Zara, my precious one," her mother whispered in their native language, "we thought we had lost you forever." "Never," Zara replied, holding her family tight. "I would find my way back to you across the entire galaxy." When they finally separated enough to look at each other properly, Zara was amazed by how well her family looked. They had obviously grieved. She could see it in the lines around her father's eyes and the way her mother held herself, but they were not broken. They were not just surviving, but actively living. "You must be Marcus," her father said, approaching the human with obvious curiosity. "Zara has told us much about you in her messages." Marcus inclined his head respectfully. "I am honored to meet you, sir. Zara has spoken of her family constantly. I feel like I already know you." "This is the human who saved our daughter's life," her mother explained to Kyan, who was staring at Marcus with undisguised fascination. "You are very tall," Kyan observed with the directness of youth. "Zara said humans were big, but she did not say they were so big." Marcus laughed and knelt down to Kyan's eye level. "You are right, I am quite tall for a human, but Zara is very brave for a Cathara, Size is not the most important thing. Are you really going to stay here and work with us? Kyan asked eagerly. Zara said you might help with the research projects. If your people will have us, yes. We have much to learn from what you have accomplished here. As they traveled from the spaceport to the refugee settlement, Zara's parents told her about their new life on New Harmony. The early months had been difficult, they admitted, but the joint Human-Cerulean administration had worked hard to ensure that refugees felt welcomed rather than merely tolerated. They did not just give us food and shelter, her father explained. They asked what we could contribute, what our skills were, how we wanted to shape our new lives. We were not treated as burdens but as valuable additions to their community. Her mother nodded agreement. I now work in the Botanical Research Division, studying how plants from our homeworld can be adapted to grow in different soil conditions. It is challenging work, but it feels like I am helping to ensure that our agricultural knowledge is not lost. And I am designing housing that can be quickly constructed for new refugee populations, her father added. Human engineering techniques combined with Cathara materials science. We have reduced construction time for emergency shelters by 60%. Kyan, not to be outdone, enthusiastically described his studies in the integration program. I am learning human and cerulean mathematics alongside our own methods. Did you know that humans approach quantum calculations completely differently than we do? Their method is actually more efficient for certain types of problems. Listening to her family's excitement about their work and studies, Zara felt a profound sense of relief. They had not just survived the loss of their homeworld, they had found ways to grow and contribute in their new environment. The fear and displacement that had haunted her for months was not reflected in their voices. The refugee settlement itself was more impressive than Zara had dared hope. Rather than the temporary camps she had envisioned, it was a well-planned community with permanent buildings, recreational facilities, schools, and research centers. The architecture was distinctly Cathara in style, but adapted for local conditions using techniques learned from other species. This is your new home, her mother said as they approached a graceful spire that rose from the center of the settlement. Your father designed it using crystal-growing techniques modified for the local mineral content. The building was beautiful, combining the organic curves of traditional Cathara architecture with structural elements that clearly drew from other design traditions. Gardens surrounded the base, filled with plants that Zara recognized from home alongside species she had never seen before. It is not exactly like what we lost, her father said quietly. But it is ours. We built it ourselves with help from friends of many species. That makes it home. As they toured the settlement, Zara was introduced to dozens of other refugees who had become friends and colleagues of her family. There were Cathara, of course, but also members of the other species who had survived attacks by the Drakari Empire. All of them had stories similar to Zara's loss, fear, displacement, followed by gradually rebuilding hope with the help of human and cerulean authorities. The humans have been remarkable, said Thera, an elderly Cathara who had become something of a community leader. They could have simply provided basic necessities and left us to manage on our own. Instead, they have actively worked to help us rebuild our lives. Many of their young people have even chosen to stay here and work with us long-term. Why do you think they do it? Zara asked, curious to hear another perspective on human motivations. Thera smiled. I have asked several of them that question. The answer is always some variation of the same thing because it is right. Because they would want someone to help them if they were in our situation. Because the galaxy is better when people work together instead of apart. That evening, the settlement held a welcome celebration for Zara and the arriving research team. It was, she learned, another tradition that had developed over the years. Anytime someone new joined the community, whether refugee or volunteer worker, the entire settlement gathered to welcome them formally. The celebration featured music, food, and stories from multiple cultures. Cathara crystal singers performed alongside human musicians and cerulean poets. The harmony that resulted was unlike anything Zara had ever heard, not the music of any single species, but something entirely new that incorporated elements from all of them. Marcus and Dr. Chen were formally welcomed into the community with ceremonies that blended traditions from multiple species. When it came time for them to respond, they did so with obvious emotion and genuine gratitude. We came here thinking we would be helping you, Dr. Chen said. But we are beginning to understand that you will be helping us far more than we could ever help you. The innovations happening here, the cooperation between species, the solutions you have developed to complex problems, these are lessons that the entire galaxy needs to learn. After the formal ceremonies ended and the crowd began to disperse, Zara found herself walking with Marcus through the settlement's gardens. They were quiet for a while, both processing the experiences of the day. "Are you happy to be home?" Marcus asked eventually. Zara considered the question carefully. "I am happy to be with my family again, but this place, it does not feel like home yet. It feels like possibility." "What do you mean?" "Home was the world we lost, the cities and libraries and gardens that the Drakari destroyed. That will always be gone." Zara touched one of the hybrid flowers growing beside the path, a bloom that combined characteristics from plants native to 3 different worlds. "But this place feels like it could become something even better. Not a replacement for what we lost, but something new that we are building together." Marcus smiled. "I think that is the most hopeful thing I have ever heard." As they walked back toward the residential buildings, Zara reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. Months ago, she had been a terrified refugee with no hope for anything beyond basic survival. Now she was surrounded by family and friends, preparing to contribute to research that would benefit people across multiple worlds, and filled with optimism about a future that seemed brighter than anything she had lost. The universe had not become less dangerous. The Drakari Empire still existed. There were still conflicts and suffering among the stars. But Zara had learned that there were also beings like Marcus and Dr. Chen and Captain Tors, humans who chose to help rather than exploit, to build rather than destroy. There were places like New Harmony where refugees could become contributors, where different species could work together toward common goals. Most importantly, she had learned that even in the darkest circumstances, hope was possible. That friendship could bloom between the most unlikely individuals. That the future, no matter how uncertain, was worth working toward. Standing in the gardens of her new home, surrounded by the sounds of her thriving community, Zara looked up at the stars and felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She was no longer a frightened refugee running from the past. She was a valued member of a community building toward the future, supported by friends who spanned multiple species, and united by the belief that the galaxy could be made better through cooperation and compassion. Tomorrow would bring new research projects, new problems to solve, new friendships to build. But tonight, she was content to simply stand in the garden with her human friend and appreciate how far they had both traveled from that dark forest where they first met. 6 months after arriving at New Harmony, Zara stood in the central laboratory of the Planetary Research Complex, watching with pride as data streams flowed across multiple displays. The agricultural modeling project she had helped design was now operational across 17 worlds, optimizing crop yields for refugee populations throughout the sector. But more important than the technical success was what the project represented: genuine partnership between species working toward common goals. The Nali colony just reported a 38% increase in protein crop production, announced Dr. Patel, a human agricultural scientist who had become one of Zara's closest collaborators. "They say the root optimization algorithms are working even better than predicted in their soil conditions." Zara felt a familiar warmth of satisfaction. The mathematics involved had been challenging, requiring her to integrate Cathara computational techniques with Nali environmental models and human engineering constraints. But the collaboration had produced results that none of the species could have achieved working alone. Marcus entered the laboratory carrying a communication tablet and wearing an expression that immediately caught Zara's attention. In the months since their arrival, she had become expert at reading his moods. This was his important news face, pleased, but trying not to get too excited until he was certain of the details. "News from the Galactic Cooperation Council," he announced. "They want to send a delegation to study our integration programs here at New Harmony. Apparently, word has spread about what we have accomplished." Dr. Chen looked up from her own workstation with interest. "What kind of delegation?" "Representatives from 12 different species, including some we have never worked with before. They want to understand how we have managed to create such successful cooperation between refugee populations and established colonies." "When?" asked Kyan, who had grown considerably in the past months and was now working as a junior research assistant while continuing his formal studies. 3 months from now. They are planning a full evaluation, not just of our research programs, but of our social integration models, economic systems, and conflict resolution mechanisms. Zara felt a flutter of nervousness. Over the past months, life at New Harmony had begun to feel normal, even comfortable. The idea of outside scrutiny brought back echoes of the vulnerability she had felt as a refugee, always conscious that her presence was conditional on the goodwill of others. Marcus seemed to sense her discomfort. "This is good news, Zara, very good news. They are not coming to evaluate whether what we are doing is acceptable. They want to learn from us so they can replicate it elsewhere." "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Chen answered. "It means that the model we have developed here, refugees and established populations working together as equals rather than as charity recipients, has been so successful that other regions want to adopt similar approaches. In other words," added Dr. Patel with a grin, "we have accidentally become the template for refugee integration across this entire sector of the galaxy." The implications of this statement were staggering. When Zara had first crashed on Haven, she had been one frightened individual hopping to survive long enough to find her family. Now, the approach that had rescued her, treating refugees as valuable contributors rather than burdens, was being studied as a model for helping millions of displaced beings across dozens of worlds. Over the following weeks, as preparations began for the Council delegation's visit, Zara found herself reflecting often on the transformation she had witnessed in her own life and in the lives of everyone around her. The refugee settlement had evolved into a thriving research and development center. Former evacuees had become respected scientists, engineers, and teachers. Children who had arrived traumatized and displaced were now confident students preparing for careers that would take them anywhere in the galaxy. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the humans themselves. Marcus and Dr. Chen had arrived at New Harmony expecting to help refugee populations adapt to existing systems. Instead, they had found themselves adapting to new ways of thinking that combined the best insights from multiple species. "I have learned more about atmospheric modeling in the past 6 months than in the previous 5 years of my career," Dr. Chen confided to Zara one evening as they worked late in the laboratory. "Cathara mathematical approaches have completely changed how I think about complex environmental systems. And I have learned that humans are far more adaptable than my people believed," Zara replied. "When we were fleeing the Drakari, many refugees said that humans would try to force us to become more like them. Instead, you have become more like us." Dr. Chen smiled. "I think we have all become something new, not more human or more Cathara, but more cooperative, more aware of what becomes possible when different perspectives work together." This theme of mutual transformation appeared repeatedly as Zara interviewed community members in preparation for the Council delegation. What had begun as a humanitarian effort to help displaced populations had evolved into something much more significant, a demonstration that species differences could be sources of strength rather than sources of conflict. The mathematical modeling that was Zara's specialty provided a perfect example. Human computational approaches were excellent for brute force analysis of large data sets. Cathara techniques were more elegant for identifying subtle patterns and relationships. Nali environmental models captured details that both human and Cathara systems missed. When all three approaches were combined, the resulting analyses were far more powerful than any single method could achieve. "It is like music," explained Thera, the elderly Cathara community leader, when Zara asked her to describe the experience of integration. "One voice singing alone can be beautiful, but when multiple voices harmonize, they create something that is more than the sum of its parts." This metaphor resonated strongly with Zara as she prepared her own presentation for the Council delegation. She had been asked to speak about the mathematical innovations that had emerged from cross-species collaboration, but she realized that the technical details were less important than the underlying principle Thera had articulated. When the delegation arrived, their diversity was even more impressive than Marcus had indicated. Along with the expected representatives from major spacefaring species, there were beings that Zara had never encountered before: crystalline entities that communicated through harmonic vibrations, gaseous collectives that existed as distributed intelligence clouds, and mechanical constructs whose creators had been lost to history, but who had developed their own civilization. The formal presentations went well. Each aspect of New Harmony's success was thoroughly documented and explained. The economic data showed that integrated communities were more productive than segregated ones. The social metrics indicated higher levels of satisfaction and lower levels of conflict. The technological innovations demonstrated clear advantages to cross-species collaboration. But the real breakthrough came during the informal discussions that followed the formal sessions. As delegation members toured the facilities and spoke directly with community members, a different picture emerged, one that focused less on systems and policies and more on relationships and trust. The mathematical models are impressive, acknowledged Delegate Zirian, the representative from the Crystalline Coalition. But what we find most remarkable is how individuals from different species have learned to work together so effectively. Can you explain how this personal cooperation developed? Zara found herself thinking back to that first night in the forest with Marcus, when a terrified refugee and a concerned explorer had somehow managed to bridge the gap between their species through simple acts of kindness and respect. I think it began with individuals choosing to see potential rather than problems, she said. When Marcus found me after my crash, he could have seen a dangerous alien or a burdensome responsibility. Instead, he saw someone who needed help and might have something to offer in return. When Dr. Chen welcomed me to Haven Station, she could have seen me as a temporary guest. Instead, she saw me as a future colleague. And when you encountered these humans, asked Delegate Vortana, a representative from an aquatic species that had recently suffered territorial losses, you could have seen them as potential threats. What made you choose to trust them instead? They earned trust through their actions, not their words, Zara replied. Marcus could have overpowered me easily, but he chose to keep his distance until I felt safe. Dr. Chen could have assigned me to basic tasks, but she chose to challenge me with meaningful work. They treated me as an individual with value, not as a representative of a refugee problem. The delegation members exchanged meaningful looks. Several took detailed notes. Others requested follow-up interviews with specific community members. By the end of their visit, it was clear that they had found what they were looking for, not just technical solutions to refugee integration challenges, but a fundamental approach to interspecies cooperation that could be applied in many different contexts. We have seen successful refugee programs before, Delegate Zirian explained during the closing ceremony. Camps that provide adequate food and shelter, processing centers that efficiently relocate displaced populations, even job training programs that help refugees find employment. But we have never seen anything like this, a community where refugees have become leaders, where established populations have adopted refugee innovations, where the distinction between us and them has disappeared entirely. The formal outcome of the delegation's visit was a recommendation that the New Harmony model be implemented at refugee sites across the galaxy, backed by substantial funding from the Galactic Cooperation Council. But for Zara, the real significance was more personal validation that the journey she had taken from frightened crash victim to respected scientist was not unique, but rather an example of what became possible when people approached each other with openness and respect. As the delegation departed and life at New Harmony returned to its normal rhythms, Zara found herself standing once again in the settlement's gardens with Marcus. This time, however, they were not alone. Kyan was there, excitedly describing his plans to study advanced engineering at the University of New Harmony. Dr. Chen was pointing out new hybrid plants to Dr. Patel. Thera was teaching a group of human children to sing traditional Kithara harmonies. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had never met?" Marcus asked as they watched their friends and colleagues enjoying the evening. Zara considered the question seriously. "I would probably have died in that forest. Even if I had survived, I would have remained afraid and isolated. I would never have discovered what became possible when people worked together. And I would have missed the opportunity to be part of something truly extraordinary," Marcus replied. "I thought I was just helping one individual in distress. I had no idea that it would lead to all of this." Looking around at the thriving community they had helped build, at the research that was improving lives across multiple worlds, at the friendships that had formed across species boundaries, Zara felt a deep sense of completion. Not the completion of an ending, but the completion of understanding, a full appreciation of how much positive change could flow from simple choices to help and trust and work together. "The delegation asked me what I thought was the most important lesson from our experience here," she told Marcus. I said it was that the universe is not divided into us and them. It is full of us who simply have not met yet. Marcus smiled. That may be the most profound thing I have ever heard. As the stars appeared above them and the sounds of the thriving community continued around them, Zara reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. She had begun as a frightened refugee with no hope beyond survival. She was ending as a respected scientist, surrounded by family and friends, contributing to work that was making the galaxy a better place for countless beings. The transformation had not been accomplished through grand gestures or sweeping policies. It had happened through countless small acts of kindness, respect, and cooperation. Through individuals choosing to see potential rather than problems, to offer help rather than judgment, to build bridges rather than walls. Standing in the garden of her new home, surrounded by evidence of what becomes possible when beings of different species choose to work together, Zara looked up at the stars and felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The universe was vast and often dangerous, but it was also full of beings like Marcus and Dr. Chen, individuals who chose to help rather than harm, to include rather than exclude, to build rather than destroy. And perhaps most importantly, she had learned that even the smallest acts of compassion could have consequences that rippled across the galaxy, creating waves of positive change that touched lives far beyond anything the original actors had imagined. Her own rescue by a human in a dark forest had led to innovations that were now helping refugee populations across dozens of worlds. Marcus's simple choice to help a stranded alien had contributed to a model of interspecies cooperation that was being adopted throughout the sector. The future was still uncertain, still full of challenges and potential conflicts. But Zara had learned that it was also full of hope that could be realized whenever individuals chose to treat each other with kindness and respect, whenever different perspectives were valued rather than feared, whenever people worked together toward common goals rather than against each other out of suspicion and misunderstanding. Tomorrow would bring new research projects, new problems to solve, new opportunities to demonstrate that cooperation was stronger than conflict. But tonight, she was content to stand in the garden with her human friend and appreciate how far they had all traveled from that dark forest where their unlikely friendship had begun, and how much farther they might yet go together.